From the studios of the Department of Communication in Phillipsburg, welcome to Prime Minister Talks with Honorable Prime Minister Sylvaria Jacobs.
Hello and welcome to Prime Minister Talks. I'm Sylvaria Jacobs, and today I'm in a discussion, a continuation actually. We did promise that, hey, we were running out of time the last time, and so with me as my guest once again is lawyer known on St. Martin, Jason Rogers, also with a background knowing the electoral system very, very well, and we're continuing our discussion on electoral reform. Mr. Rogers, welcome.
Prime Minister, thanks for having me back. Indeed, it was a very, fruitful discussion and a very lively, and a number of things that we actually wanted to discuss. We didn't get the chance to do so because of time constraints, so thank you for having me back. And hopefully we'll be able to address those issues.
Yes, definitely. Mr. Rogers of Hoovers and Rogers, attorney and consultants, is well known on the island. He served also for some time, just for those who are maybe tuning in for the first time, as the chair of our main voting bureau. And just maybe give a little hint as to what your responsibilities were as it relates to that.
Well, as chair of the Central Voting Bureau, Prior to 2010, everyone used to call it the main voting bureau, but it's the Central Voting Bureau, and our task was to organize free, fair, and open elections. And as I indicated back then, as soon as we would get the national decree signed by the Prime Minister and the Governor that there are new elections called, we hit the ground running and organize the elections, get different stakeholders into play. We make sure that all the instructions that we get, because it's done also while we are independent, the election falls under the Prime Minister. So decrees such as the color of political parties and different things that need to happen. That's, say, for instance, the division of the country within districts. All of those things, we once we get that information by means of decree, we communicate that to the parties and also the public at large. But we have to ensure that the whole process is done in an open and transparent manner, and we are actually charged with that task. I'm saying we, I'm no longer part of it. At that time, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But the Central Voting Bureau continues to have that task.
Absolutely.
And as you know, electoral reform has been discussed over the years, especially when we see the happenings at Parliament, and people get a bit confused because you vote for your Parliament.
Correct.
Yeah, so we have 15-man Parliament, 15-person Parliament, and for me, as Minister of General Affairs, and you mentioned Prime Minister, responsible to ensure that we have open and fair elections, and that it suits the purpose, and that we are happy with the way our system functions. I felt the need to bring this information session to the general public, which will be followed, of course, by town hall meetings and even a symposium at the end, because we want to reach to a point where we can say we are working towards a system, or we're going to change the system if necessary to what it is we want and need as a country.
Well, that is so important, those points. I mean, just like bringing it to the community and having the town hall meetings and the symposium that you mentioned, that I find is something that is very important, because by doing so, you're actually involving the community. And
yes.
What is so important, people actually don't understand that enough, I find, is that by involving the people actually get trust and confidence in the system. And it's so important in a democratic electoral system, a democratic system, that people have that trust and confidence in electing their leaders.
Yes, and so we have the survey out. So I'm going to encourage you to fill out that survey, go to the government's Facebook page or my Facebook page. Fill that out. We're up to about 355 persons. I really want to get many more, let's say, opinions in there. So I know more than that. Look and listen to this program. So let's get involved. Put your words in so that it can be taken along in the larger discussions in those town hall meetings. Indeed, Jason, we had three very, very key points that came up during the previous discussion that we had. And it was in terms of with electoral change, if we look at within the region, or that people around here know, St. Martin's electoral system is maybe a lot different. So currently we have a parliamentary election. This is since 10-10-10.
Yeah.
And we elect 15 members who then appoint ministers.
Correct.
And they have a role to play each. We hear about a trias politica.
Yeah.
Maybe you can explain a little bit about that.
Well, the Trias Politicas comes actually from the French philosopher Charles Montesquieu, where it basically talks about the separation of powers. You have the legislative power, the executive power, and also the judicial power, which is the court. Legislative power is parliament, which we actually vote for. And then we have the executive branch, which is, of course, government. And as you indicated, we as a people, we do elect our parliamentarians, or 15 parliamentarians, and we do not elect our government. And it is so that we, the people, then appoint our government. What do I mean by that is that by extension, Parliament then, that
acts on behalf of the people.
Correct. So by that, and that is one of the things that I don't know by, it was customary back in the days that, you know, the Central Voting Bureau, the night of election, will sit in the government building at the AC Legislative Hall, by the old government building, and I indicated, you know what, we should not be doing that anymore, because we are actually sending it's in a parliamentary election indeed, and you're sending a wrong message. So let's do it in the House of Parliament. As a matter of fact, I've said also postulation day should be there. So when people come and postulate themselves, and it's generally speaking so that they would like to give a speech and address their constituencies, do it in the Hall of Parliament.
You did touch on some very interesting topics there, but if we go into that now, we'll run out of time in this segment. So what I'll do is take a break now, and then we'll have a longer second segment so that we could go into the details with our, let's call it, election expert, Jason Rogers.
Prime Minister Talks with Honorable Prime Minister Sylvia Jacobs.
This hurricane season, make a list of supplies and assemble them before hurricane strikes. Have enough food and water for each person for at least 3 days. Fill your prescriptions and have medicine on hand. Radios, batteries, and phone chargers are also must-haves. Gas up your vehicle and have cash on hand. For more information, visit stmartingov.org/hurricane. And for the latest coronavirus COVID-19 guidelines, visit stmartingov.org/coronavirus. This public service announcement is brought to you by the government of St. Martin.
Prime Minister Talks with Honorable Prime Minister Sylvia Jacobs.
Welcome back to Prime Minister Talks. I'm here with renowned lawyer Jason Rogers. Jason brought up something that, you know, when managing the elections, everything he felt as chair at the time, that everything should be handled at the Parliament building. I did experience that, get the opportunity to speak to the voters, etc. And then something interesting. So we are electing members of Parliament. Parliament, on behalf of the people, appoint the government, which is then the Council of Ministers, because government is together with the governor, which isn't elected. So we elect the council, or appoint the Council of Ministers. And interesting tidbit that we have so far from our over 350 survey respondents is that many of them, the majority, have bachelor's and or master's degree, and the majority feel that the current electoral system doesn't reflect voters' wishes or voters' decisions. So why do you think that would be?
Well, first of all, I would, we have what you're saying, that the respondents we have, most are bachelors and masters. It would be good that if everybody would be able to respond, because I feel that that doesn't only, you have a better idea, because everyone who is eligible to vote has a say.
Yes.
So it would be good if they actually respond. But nevertheless, their point is very important, because you're indicating that
the demographic,
and they're saying, well, it doesn't reflect their desire, the system. Then is because then what I actually conclude from that, though, is that possibly the persons that they're electing, they're voting for, are persons that they would prefer see in the Council of Ministers than as opposed to in Parliament. Because
so currently, this government, the majority of those who had received the parliamentary vote and had the seat, I think 5 or 6 of my council were actually elected members of Parliament. So your representation that you voted for in Parliament is currently at government level. So maybe that's where it is for this group of people. However,
Well, those are things, those are issues that actually should be discussed during campaign. And I think be open about it. Not only is it so that those persons, the electorate, have to complain out and ask the people, ask the persons that are running, hey, where do you stand? Are you going to represent me in Parliament, or is it your intention to go into the Council of Ministers? Vice versa, the flip of the coin is that those that are running, they can actually indicate, well, listen, my intention is to stay into Parliament, or is it to, ultimately go into the Council of Ministers? But you can also look at it this way, PM, that each party that is running, they can say, listen, we are planning to serve the people once elected, but here are our proposed list of candidates for the Council of Ministers. That's also possible.
That then, in advance, if I put my vote with this party, these are the people that they would be putting forth. I think that's a very good proposal. I think even one of the questions that were asked also is the importance of voting on individuals vis-a-vis voting on parties. On the French side, there's a party system.
Correct.
And on the Dutch side, even though you have to have a party, we talked about this last time,
Correct.
to be able to register and get on the ballot, even if your party is one person, you have the party system for elections.
Correct.
Afterwards, individuals are sworn in.
Correct.
And not parties. So is that something that can be changed within the system?
So indeed, look, so we have, if you look at our legislation, we have a party system, right? So it's based on the party that you get in there. But when we look at our Constitution, or I think it's Article 61, paragraph 3, that indicates that persons are in Parliament, the system is only lost. In other words, they make their vote on their own, based on their own conscience, not based on what party wants them actually to vote, or how to vote. So from that perspective, it is so that, we've seen over the years that certain persons that say, well, listen, I do no longer align with the party's ideology, therefore they go into an independent. You ask if that is something that can change. Well, that is a discussion that we need to have, and that's good. But I feel that we are having this discussion here today, and I hopefully that it wouldn't stay here. But all parties, and as a matter of fact, will go out into the community and make the whole issue regarding, not issue, but the topic regarding electoral reform be discussed, and that people will hear the intake, because likewise, like I said, it is important to have the input of the people in order for them to be confident and have trust in that system.
I totally agree with you, and I think the point that you're making, that we want a clear overview of all the demographics on the island.
Absolutely.
To respond to the survey, because this is giving specific to what, let's say, people who have studied, who are working in some professional, semi-professional aspect feel about the electoral system. But we would want to hear the voices of all our people. So maybe we as the organization would have to maybe put out some paper surveys as well to add them into what we're doing digitally. So that's something for the organization to talk about, to think about. But I think what we're talking about here now is mostly the party aspect, and this was one that was brought up last time in terms of party ideals and discipline.
Correct.
And actually belonging to a party. And I think what I mentioned then was the ad hoc elections. They didn't give parties a chance to really gel prior to an election. So hopefully in these 4 years we will have that. Parties are able to grow stronger together. What do you think? How do you think that influences the strength of the party after election?
Well, I don't think that it only has to do with the duration of time, so the amount of years, the 4 years. It has to do with what we discussed, the political maturity, but also the fact that each party engage with their membership and keep them informed of what the ideology is, to keep them, I wouldn't say intact, but engaged. Right, so that these people, the representatives as well, will be feeling, okay, you know what, I feel still aligned with the party's ideology. I think that is so very important, and then that would also, to hopefully then, create some kind of a stability in government as well, in terms that the persons don't say, well, you know what, I do no longer subscribe to the ideology of the party, and therefore I'm going as an independent member, which, by the way, is not legislated.
The independent aspect?
The independent aspect is not legislated. What it is it's an unwritten rule that have actually what we call in Dutch een ongeschreven regel, and it becomes like a customary law, so to speak, and that is respected over the period of time.
So then this could be one of the reforms to be able to specify how and if, what structure, what weight the independent member would carry, and not necessarily as a faction, because it's not they are not legislated as factions.
It is not legislated. It's an ongeschreven regel, and that has been actually been respected all over many years, not only within the Netherlands, Antilles, but also within the Netherlands. That is something that you can say, you know what, we would want to regulate that aspect for St. Martin. How do we go as a country about persons no longer that have been elected based on a party system into our parliament and no longer is in alignment with the party's ideology? How do we deal with such situations? Do we go over into, do we remain in the current situation whereby they will go into become an independent member? Or do we say, okay, if you no longer align to the party's ideology, then you can also resign as a member of parliament too, right? That's also, and that's a discussion that we will then need to have to see, how do people actually feel about that.
Yes, very interesting discussion. I think that's definitely what the people would want to talk about. We'll be right back after this short break.
Prime Minister Talks with Honorable Prime Minister Sylvaria Jacobs.
Hello. As previously mentioned, the Ministry of General Affairs is diligently working to prepare for electoral reform. But we cannot do that without your input. As such, as Prime Minister, we have issued a survey to get the input of the population on where we would like to go with electoral reform. Thereafter, we'll be having some town hall meetings where you again will have that opportunity to give feedback and answer questions, as well as ask questions on this topic to get clarity on where we are and where we want to go. So it will only take a few minutes, and it will be posted on our Facebook page. That's the government's Facebook page, as well as my Facebook page. And I do encourage you to let your voice be heard, go to the survey, fill it in, and be a part of the change we want to see in St. Martin.
Prime Minister Talks with Honorable Prime Minister Sylvaria Jacobs.
Welcome back to Prime Minister Talks, here with Jason Rogers, one of our experts in the field of elections on St. Martin. We're talking electoral reform. I think the conversation always goes on in the break, and then we get stuck because we've said this already. No, but Jason, it's important for me to share information with the public. And so understanding the reality of our system now, hearing that people are not seeing that their decision is reflected based on who they see in Parliament today, I think it's important to mention that they also, a majority of them, feel that change is needed. So this is key. A majority of who have listened or who have put forth their information feel that change is needed. As a professional in the field, giving the electorate the opportunity to choose the parliament that we have now, and hearing that some would also prefer to also choose the prime minister and or ministers, what are some positives and or negatives where that is concerned?
Well, I think the most positive thing is that discussion is being had. That is very positive, because then we see what the sentiments are. The system that we have now, the question is, should we change it or should we tweak it? Electoral reform, we're talking about tweaking it. But you can also try to change the whole system if that's what you want. But see how it best works for St. Martin. That's very important. I think to your point, or the point of that demographic of the survey, that you can actually indicate, well, you know what, during the whole campaign, that you ask that question as an eligible voter to the persons that are postulating themselves. Where do you stand? Do you want to stay in Parliament, or is it your intention to ultimately go into the Council of Ministers? Hold them accountable. Ask them outright, where do they stand? And as a matter of fact, those persons that postulated themselves, they could be open and honest to the electorate and say, hey, what their intentions are. And then you know where your vote is, where it's going, and what that value of that vote will be. Would it be for Parliament, or is it the intention that person will be going into the Council of Ministers, the executive branch?
I think some would say, well, even if the elected person is at the executive branch, your representative is working for you. Would that be a fair statement, or do you think that this demographic is not looking at it that way?
Well, you know, indeed, it is so that the person that you would have elected is indeed still working for you, but it's a different type of job. And I think as a parliamentarian, you have a very important job too, not only to actually supervise the actions of government, the executive branch, but also to legislate. And making those legislations are so important. Very important.
Yes,
but
indeed.
with electoral reform, I think we should also keep in mind it's not only the electoral ordinance, the kiesverordening, but we're talking about the kiesbesluit, which is also goes hand in hand with the kiesverordening. But if we're talking about electoral reforms and the kind of reform that we're talking about, or that people are interested in, we're talking about ultimately changing certain parts of the Constitution as well.
Yeah. That would be the one that would require change,
Correct.
and not necessarily a tweaking. And also the one that regulates political parties. Mm-hmm. So there's quite some legislation that would be affected.
It's not a 1, 2, 3 thing.
Yeah.
So, you have to really put your minds together and say, listen, this is what we want to do, but then also review all those legislations.
Yes, I think the majority of people, when they talk electoral reform over the past 10 years, it's mainly about seeing the phenomenon of the ship jumping and creating a more stable representation of the people. But now, as we go along in the discussion, people are talking about other things, maybe changing the whole system itself. How is the French side doing it? How are other Caribbean regions doing it? So I think these discussions coming up in the month of September will have the effect to say, hey, do we want to go to that district system where you want a representative per district? So then we have 15 districts then, instead of,
Correct.
the way we're doing it now, and then electing a prime minister who then selects his or her cabinet. This is what a lot of Caribbean countries do.
Correct.
Or the runoff system, as the French do.
As the French side.
So then you're done stuck with 2, and then you go in and you have a set opposition, you have a set government, and you can execute for 4 years. But something I'm asking about is that political maturity of allowing a government, as you see in other countries, you sit your term, and then at the end of the term, if you're graded to have done a good job, you might get a second term. If not, then you're out.
Right. But that's the electorate that actually giving you that report card. But if it is so that during that period of time that for whatever reason certain persons say, what, we can no longer remain in this coalition, then you would have indeed that either you have a change of government, or you have new elections, or you don't necessarily need to have that, but you have whereby some persons may become independent members of parliament, and that report card can indeed still be given, but it doesn't really matter, because you can have persons become independent and still that the government remains for 4 years as well. But still, I believe, besides political maturity, I believe it's the task and the responsibility of the parties to keep their members engaged. And not only are those ideologies for campaign period, but also throughout the whole 4 years and beyond.
Correct. And I think that's where strong party ideology and strong connectedness plays a role. And if we're going to continue with that system, even though I see, based on the whole Lynch law, even the electorate are looking at, I want to vote on a person vis-a-vis a party. So that is another discussion that, I think will be coming forth in our town hall sessions. We'll be having several professionals like yourself who have been involved in the situation, whether it's legislatively or on your end at organizing the elections, or as just persons with experience in the field to come forth, politicians, of course, to talk about how it affects them. But for me, the goal is to ensure, like you say, to engage the public and ensure that they have a say in where we're going.
Right, absolutely. And I think what is also a little bit how do you say it? It's
Value?
not on the value, but it doesn't be spoken a lot in this day and age that, the digitalization, that also should play a role in election as well. We're talking about, do we go and vote electronically, or do we only do electronic counting? I've seen it in the Netherlands where they vote electronically. I know certain places before too they used to do it manually. Curacao used to do manually, then electronically. Now they've gone back to manually. But also, for instance, I remember when I went to the Netherlands in 2018 to view the elections there, they were even voting on trams. You had a polling station was in a tram actually.
What?
And yeah,
wow.
And even on certain train stations, you had polling stations there.
So that would also have resolved then the issue that we were talking about in terms of even expanding our electorate for our citizens who may be abroad, etc. So that would definitely call for a different change of the law. So we're running out of time, unfortunately. But I'm hoping that you, as the people of St. Martin, are engaged, ready to take part, listen, learn, so that we can move toward the needed change that you want to see on St. Martin. I want to thank you, Jason, for being my guest here, and I look forward to you playing a role in whether it's the town halls or the symposium, so that we can continue to enlighten the people of St. Martin so that their choices can make the difference for how this country is run. Until next time, I'm Silveria Jacobs.
Prime Minister Talks with Honorable Prime Minister Silveria Jacobs.